Thank you so much for this kind invitation. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to share with you my vision, my research work about urban and territorial mutations. For these 7 minutes for explaining this concept of 15-minute city, I wanted to explore with you in order to go beyond the motto of a 15-minute city. Of course, this concept has become a very popular worldwide, but we need to understand what this, in fact, this concept. We need today to define what is the path for living in the next years, in the next decade, in particular when several people say today we should live in a new normality. The question is, what is the new narrative? What is the new urban narrative? What is in reality the new urban lifestyle for continuing to live in these very hard times? Because on the one hand, over the past decade, we haven't been living in a real normality. Climate change is the most important threat for humanity, and this is the significant threat for urban dwellers around the world. Climate change is today a significant constraint for living differently, in particular for reaching the horizon 2050, the carbon neutrality. On the other hand, unfortunately, for 1 year, we have been living around the world in all kinds of cities, big cities, middle cities, small cities, with this terrible COVID-19 pandemic crisis. In reality, the concept of a 15-minute city is a concept that has been emerging in the convergence of these double crises. On the one hand, the climate change, because we need to shift towards a new urban paradigm based on low carbon lifestyles. And on the other hand, in order to continue to live in spite of the constraint of social and physical distances. In reality, with the concept of 15-minute city, the real question is to define in what kind of city do we want to live in. Until now, we have been living in cities with this acceptation of the unacceptable. We have been continuing to live in mineral cities with the traffic jams, with the diesel cars, with the air polluted. We have been continuing to live for the consumption in this kind of mall and in several cases to move in cities in the poor conditions, including with the mass transportation. The COVID-19 crisis is today, in reality, a big opportunity for breaking this urban lifestyle. With the 15-minute city, we wanted to respond with a way for embracing the sustainable development based on sustainable development goals. In fact, the sustainable city This is the convergence in a new environmental, economical, and social impact for proposing to citizen dwellers in cities, in particular by the local governance, a new roadmap based on the protections, the regulation with the common good. The common good, this is one of the key elements for understanding the concept of 15-minute city. The common good, in reality, is at the center of the new urban narrative. With the common good, with the urban common good, we wanted to shift the mindset for proposing this concept of the high quality societal life. During several decades, 2 decades after the emergence of the internet, the smartphone, with the algorithm, several people thought that the way for cities is a smart city with the technologies for developing new solutions based on technological tools. But in reality, in our point of view, the real question today is to improve the quality of life of citizen dwellers, and the concept of 15-minute city, we wanted to propose a new way for, with this city of proximities, take our time for living differently. Take our time is the motto for changing our urban lifestyle. The 15-minute city concept is in reality this new path for proposing the livable cities in the path of James Jacobs with the living cities, and the proximities is at the same time a new paradigm based on 3 key elements. The first one, to change the rhythm of the city, the chrono-urbanism. The second point is the chronotopia, to use better and more each one of square meters of our cities, to transform each square meter in a multi-purpose functions. And the chronotopia, this is the scientific name. And the third point, the topophilia. This is the new capability for loving our places, our street, our locations in general. We wanted to propose with the 15-minute city this concept of the happy proximity for cities. The idea is not to fight for having smart city, but to have happy citizens in happy city. The concept is the social circularity. The social circularity is the idea for proposing within reduced perimeter 15 minutes in the compact zone or 30 minutes in the low or middle density. The access by in 15-minute city by foot or by bike, the access to the maximum of 6 urban social functions: to live, to work, to supply, to care, to learn, to enjoy. We consider that if we have the possibility to propose in each one of location of cities the access for the 6 urban social functions, we have the possibility for maximizing the quality of life. And our target is to increase the new indicator of the of our urban quality of life: my well-being with my family, my friends, my sociability with my neighbor and my work colleagues, and my better sustainability with the ecological behavior and otherness. Our vision is to propose a human-oriented urbanism, and we have the possibility to mix the urban social functions with the material implementation or immaterial, in particular, if we could use a new technology. We have been developing the new city ontology in our urban research for defining each one of the 6 urban social functions. And in reality, we wanted to break with the vertical functionality in cities. During 70 years, our cities in reality have been proposing monofunctional uses. Several infrastructures are totally or fully dedicated for one of the functions. We want to, in reality, to mix the social uses, to mix to mix people, to mix social professional categories. We wanted to mix gender. We want to, in reality, to develop this high quality social living life. We need, in reality, with the 15-minute city, to reinvent the proximity. We need to build this vicinity with the multi-services in the different proximities for 100 until 1 kilometer and in a polycentric way. This is in reality the concept of 15-minute city. The idea is not to build a city as a collection of rural hamlets. The idea is to propose a vibrant city with this implementation with the whole city for delivering the multi-services. We wanted to develop this chosen mobility and no longer continue to live with the constraint mobility. We want to, in this pandemic crisis, propose a new decentralized urban life. We wish to develop a new urban narrative, in particular for working. We have the possibility today for going from the corporate towers to the corporate working. In our hard times of COVID-19, we have this hope for proposing a decentralized work, decentralized job. For that, in my research team, we have been developing a powerful digital platform in order to visualizing the different material or immaterial resources and to propose a powerful tool for implementing new societal services for using the data-driven management for a greener city. And in Paris, the mayor of Paris, Ms. Anne Hidalgo, has considered that the way for the next 6 years for this new mandature is to develop this new model. To learn, to work, to share, to reuse, to enjoy in the outdoor, to engage the community, to develop the short circuit, to develop the new medical service in the proximity. This is the concrete application. This is the concrete transformation of the city of Paris, and this is not only the public spaces, but as well the ground zero of different buildings, because this is the common good, and the city of Paris has created the commercial property for renting without a speculative market the square meters for installing shops, libraries, etc. This is a recent picture of the schools, because for 1 month we have been starting this concrete revolution, because until now the schools in Paris are closed during the weekend, and with the 15-minute city we wanted to reuse the different square meters, including the schools, for developing all kind of activities, different of pedagogical activities. This is the very nice project, totally finished, because this is a new district of the 15-minute city, totally transformed in this way, a greener place with social mixing, with the mixing of the social functions, without cars, totally dedicated for a greener and peaceful life. I want to just for finishers to propose to join the international initiative launched with the cities, including with the city of London, for transforming 18 cities for reinventing proximities. This international initiative is currently open until the end of March, and you have the possibility, students and researchers, to submit projects. Thank you so much. It's a very pleasure for me to take part in the discussion. Thank you, Roland.
Hello everyone. I'm Phillippa Banister and Director of Street Space. We're a social enterprise, and we work with people to reimagine their streets and spaces to make them feel safer, bring joy and social connection. And we're very much about trying to kind of the doing of what some of Professor Karthaus has just spoken about, which is obviously really inspiring. And Roland asked me to speak a little bit about how can we work with local communities to really empower a change in the use of streets, and one that is really owned by those communities and not just from the top down. So we're a small team of quite varied people who love people. So we're not kind of all urban planners or architects. We come from lots of different backgrounds in design, arts, anthropology, as well as kind of working with architects and urban designers. But I think it's quite key that we're coming from lots of different perspectives. So when we start working on streets, we use this version of a design thinking process, and we sort of try and use this to really get to grips with a very granular level of detail in terms of a street or neighborhood where we're working. And we really try to kind of really unearth a particular spot. So we'll be talking to the shopkeepers, we'll be talking to children crossing the street after school, we'll be talking to people on street corners, we'll be talking to people riding their bikes, we'll be talking to the people that live on the shopping parade, for example, and really valuing what they have to say and asking lots and lots of questions about what their vision for the street is, or the space or the neighborhood, and how it serves them. Because I think we see our role often as kind of asking questions that maybe haven't been asked before about who, how the space is shared. Obviously 80% of public space in London is made up of streets, and is that shared fairly among especially the most vulnerable people, and sort of asking people questions that help them to think about that. We do lots of trying to kind of support people to choose what they want to focus on, whether it is about kind of making places more child friendly or easier to get around by bike, or just more pleasant and more joyful, and sort of getting around in a way that makes them feel safe and like they're part of a community where they belong. Then we work with people to collaboratively design, which can mean lots of different things to lots of different people, but we take it to mean coming together, whether that's on or offline, and using lots of interactive and quite playful methods to really try and spark ideas and create things together, benefiting from each other's lenses and ways of seeing the world. And something that we always do in projects is testing. So whether that's very low cost version of the ideas, which I'll take you through some examples of in a minute, and we always want to test and iterate quickly before anything is permanent. And obviously we've seen over the summer in London lots of experimentation around these kind of experimental traffic orders, and people really not kind of trusting and understanding that these are experiments, which in theory is a very good way to design. But I think there's a lot of kind of mistrust and confusion about how these are actually used in the built environment. But this is something we try to do on a very small scale. I'll explain how it works. So our projects always start with people, as I said. So these young lads we spoke to about their experience cycling around this neighbourhood, how safe they feel on their bikes, where are they going to and from. We sort of really love to just understand and see things from different perspectives. So we always start projects with real people and that listening, which is so important. Trying to get the word out, trying to sort of ensure that people know that something is happening so that they can have their say in whatever way they're able to. This is obviously before COVID, but we always try and bring people together to take part in the collaborative design process. This is an area in Dagenham where we've been working on a low emission neighbourhood project, and looking at traffic calming interventions and ways to make it safer for walking and cycling. And people identified this blank space in the middle of a car park as having the potential to become a new public space. It's in front of a small shopping parade, and it's quite well overlooked. And people were sort of saying how maybe we could use this space as a sort of informal gathering point, because we're too afraid to go to the parks and these larger open expanses where people are afraid of dogs and drug taking and antisocial behaviour. So we often use things like you can see here, model kits, and really getting very hands-on with people to sort of, and really supporting them to take control of how we could reimagine from a range of young and old perspectives that we can all benefit from. As I said, talking to shopkeepers, unearthing the kind of history and the stories of a place, and really trying to get to the bottom of what really makes this neighbourhood important for people, so we can bring that out as part of placemaking and place shaping process. Always putting children at the heart of all the things that we do. This is just working with some year fives from a local primary school to carry out a healthy street audit, and doing lots of things like lo-fi testing of air quality, and assessing spots for shade and shelter, places to sit, and yeah, also just kind of giving them space to imagine what a better street might look like for them. And sort of it's really wonderful experience to be a part of, because they're not as trapped in as maybe some adults in terms of who should have the space. And this is an example of some of the ways we test ideas. So some people we've spoken to was about how about some playful elements in this public space, because it's very grey and it's very kind of quite sparse and there's not many things to do. And I think in our inspiration pack we had some pictures from Copenhagen where they have sort of flush mini trampolines in the pavement. And so we tried to bring these ideas to life with a temporary trampoline and sort of lots of activities for different young people as part of this testing day, and really honouring the ideas that had come out of the design process. This is another test where people were talking about how, you know, could we have a notice board? Like, people might think that nowadays maybe notice boards are a bit pointless, we've got digital, but many people in this neighbourhood don't have access to Wi-Fi and don't have enough data on their phones to access all the information locally. And this was another opportunity to kind of really take a risk, because many people said, oh, you put that notice board up for 5 minutes, someone will burn it down. The sort of view and attitude of their own neighborhood was very, very negative. And so actually this notice board has been up for 3 months or even more, and it's sort of looking great and really going strong and becoming a sort of notice meeting point to test this idea of how that would work. And this is the design that we've been developing, which is due for construction in the over the next few months, which features a permanent Christmas tree, which is sort of building on the test that we had over the last few years of kind of having a tree at Christmas that people can decorate and celebrate for all different types of festivals and seasons. Another example, just quickly, of kind of how we really try and listen to what is the priority for people locally. This is in Barking Town Centre, where a report from the council noted that over half the population don't feel safe after dark. And the majority of those people were women, older people and disabled people. And so instead of just kind of wanting to plot where incidents are occurring, we wanted to apply a design-led approach and creatively reimagine how each space could actually be transformed in a low-cost way, obviously not solving the whole problem, but in a way reclaiming and taking agency of each of these spaces, to see if we could therefore then unlock lots of different ideas about how this space could be transformed long term. And you can see here from the post-its, we initially just asking people outside McDonald's, where are the spaces you feel safe? People know, and they know where they don't feel safe. And it's just trying to, it's really fascinating and privileged to really act on what people know and their knowledge from that local space. Bringing people together and asking questions like, if you were holding your best friend's birthday party in this alleyway, what would you do with £50? And these trials and tests led to some funding where we were able to test out these kind of light up messages in the alleyway, and 60% of people felt safer as a result. We're doing this on another space here in Barking, some footbridges, which are used by hundreds of people every day. And again, in quite low cost ways, we're trying to really work with people to test ideas and see what we can do to improve the number of people feeling safe, and also look at challenging antisocial behaviour through trying to love these bridges a little bit more, despite the chronic lack of investment that they've never had. But I just wanted to touch briefly on some of the challenges, because many people think, engagement's a bit of a silver bullet, involve people, and then, we can, they'll take ownership and it'll all be great. But it's definitely not as easy as that. I think community engagement is absolutely incredible, but it's extremely challenging, and it takes a lot of time to build the trust and also to work and to try and create a common vision. I loved your idea, Carlos, about a common good, but in the communities that I'm working, there's such a lack of trust between citizen and state. There's a real breakdown of trust on both sides. And so I think people aren't willing to kind of move into that space of, this is for a common good. I think also that there's often challenges around leadership versus collaboration. So our processes try and build leadership capabilities within citizens to take ideas forward, to take action, and to move through a design process. But we often then meet councillors who don't necessarily trust those local leaders, or they don't want to sort of agree with what the insights are from that local area. And as we know, balancing hard and like very loud and soft voices through a design process and trying to find ways to sort of let people be in other people's shoes is something that's very challenging. And also, people are very strained, especially in areas of low income asking questions about what if instead of just what is a very difficult space to be in. And I think we always come from a place of respect to people's challenge, and also from a place of what is strong, not what is wrong. But I think that takes a lot of getting used to for people. And probably just run out of time, but some of our key manifesto points there. But
I'm Kirsty Hoyle, and I'm the CEO of Transport for All. We are a disabled people's organisation that campaigns for a more accessible transport system and for more accessible and equitable streets. I'm going to talk to you this evening about our report Pave the Way, which was the research that we did starting summer of 2020 up to the end of 2020, and it was our research into the effect of low traffic neighbourhoods and the barriers to active travel. Some people find it difficult to understand why the two are the same thing on disabled people. It's interesting because it was a very controversial initiative across the UK, and we sort of waded into what we called internally the new Brexit LTNs, where it's a very divisive topic in the UK. So, and we noticed at Transport for All that disabled people, our members, were telling us that they were being disproportionately affected, that they hadn't been consulted, that in some cases they didn't know their area had been turned into an LTN because they hadn't been told in a way that was accessible for them. And we thought, surely this can't be true. So we started talking to various local authorities and to transport operators, and also to our own members. And we decided to look at this more closely. So we did a research project, we did a qualitative project, and we spoke to 84 disabled people, the majority of whom were in London, and I think 5 represented different parts of the UK. And we did some coding, so we got some quantitative data from that research, but really we were interested in the qualitative data, because if we're looking at initiatives that benefit the many, disabled people will never win as they are not the many. So our research looked at the impact on individuals, and then we brought that together to look at some different themes. One of the issues for disabled people around low traffic neighbourhoods and other active travel initiatives, including micromobility, is that they are often co-opted by either side of an argument. So we saw lots of press last year, lots of councillors and other people in positions of power and influence saying disabled people think that, disabled people feel that, and making presumptions about why active travel initiatives would or wouldn't be suitable for disabled people. Something that Carlos said at the very beginning is about the new normal. And one of the things that's really important for us as we look at our post-COVID recovery is that our old normal wasn't accessible either. So yes, please, let's take this opportunity to do something different. We absolutely don't want to go back to where we were. We spoke to 84 people, and I think we were very keen not to take a stance. We weren't pro or anti-LTNs, we weren't pro or anti-anything. We only saw it through the prism of the effect on disabled people. I'm going to share my screen now and show you a bit about the report. So you should be able to see. So this is all on our website. So this is our report, Pave the Way. And this was our summary. And we found that 83% of disabled people spoken to felt very strongly impacted by the low traffic neighbourhoods. And sadly, 3 in 4 criticised how changes in their local area were communicated to them. I'll give you an example. One member of ours reported and showed us that they'd been communicated to about the change in their area that was an LTN with a drawing, a sort of artist's impression of what it might be like. Now, if you're a visually impaired person that uses your street furniture or different things on your street to navigate your way, an artist's impression of what it might look like is not helpful at all. And it's also not helpful at all if you can't see it. So we were seeing really inaccessible ways of communicating these schemes. One of the things that was the most impactful for us is the fact that these schemes the pace of change was huge across the UK last year and is continuing. I was in a meeting the other day, and I think the DFT were talking about the unprecedented 2 billion that's been invested in this area. And we obviously would like to see more of that invested in making sure that disabled people are not disproportionately affected by low traffic neighbourhoods and whatever you call them, and also have better access to active travel initiatives. Because when you have a fast pace of change using things like experimental traffic orders, things return to how they've always been. And how they've always been is inaccessible. Our society is based on the medical model of disability, which states that if you have an impairment, you're disabled by that impairment. Whereas under the social model of disability, you're disabled by disabling barriers in society. So, for example, a streetscape initiative that hasn't thought about your needs. So there's no drop curb. It's meant that you cannot get down your street. Your carers can't get down your street. So now they've got 10 minutes less to spend with you. All of these unintended consequences weren't thought about. That's what happens when you rush things through. We return to the norm, and the norm is inaccessible. So consultation and speaking to disabled people is very important. But what we're really interested at TFA, and I'll kind of let you all read the report in your own time, I hope. What we're really interested in is more inclusive and genuinely co-produced consultation processes and equality and impact assessments. These are things that one person in a local authority or in an organisation will do with no particular experience, and they're left really vulnerable. But actually, a proper co-produced consultation process is an opportunity for innovation. We've been organising focus groups with really diverse pan-impairment groups of people who are meeting local authorities or we've done some with some e-scooter companies. And the feedback is that, we want more innovation. There's a fear, I think, that if there's an issue around access with an initiative, that we must back away and just get on with it. And I think for me, the phrase that you used, Phillippa, is interesting. The idea of the common good, that doesn't really kind of square when it comes to meeting access needs for disabled people, because the common good has never really included them. So that needs changing too before we kind of agree that there is a common good, I think. So so we're very interested in a complete overhaul and a rebranding of the impact assessments. And our manifesto is up on our website, so you can have a look at that. Roland, I know you're pushed for time, so I'm going to bring it to a close and allow the next speaker to come on.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Kirsty. I think those are some really good points to pick up on in the discussion at the end anyway. So I look forward to that. Can you stop sharing your screen, please? And finally, we'll pass over to Julia Thrift.
Hello, thank you, Roland. I'll just share my screen if I can. I hope you can all see that. Great. So good evening, everyone. I'm Julia Thrift, Director of Healthier Placemaking at the Town and Country Planning Association, the TCPA. Now, I just need to get this to move. Why isn't it letting me move? Oh, there we go. Great. So the TCPA is a charity. We work across the UK and beyond, and we work to try and create places where everyone can live healthy, sustainable and happy lives. We work with and through the planning system, but also with community groups and businesses and councils and all sorts of people. And in the last few years in particular, we've done a lot of work around planning and creating places where it's easy for everyone to live a healthy life. So just a quick thought about what keeps people healthy. We often assume that it's the NHS and hospitals that keep us healthy, but in fact, they're really good at fixing us once we're ill. But the things that keep people healthy are very often the places where they live and the people around them and the natural environment around them. That's the stuff that prevents us ending up in the hands of the NHS. And there's been increasing recognition in the last few years of how important place is to health, and how important communities are for health as well. So as this has become more and more understood, all all sorts of organisations have become interested in creating healthier places, including NHS England, which ran a 3-year project to see whether it would be possible to create brand new places that really supported people's health. And that was called the Healthy New Towns project. It ran for 3 years. It was particularly focused on how we could plan and design and manage brand new places. But a lot of what was learnt through the project is also very relevant to making existing places better. The TCPA was involved in bringing together the learning and information from that project and packaging it up into these how-to guides, how to create healthy places. And they're free to download on NHS England's website. And one of the important things in putting health into place, those documents, was about how important it is to create places that are complete and compact and connected. So complete meaning that they had all the things that people need nearby. Compact meaning that they weren't sprawled out, that you could walk or cycle or catch a bus and within a fairly short space of time you'd get to where you needed to go. And connected, meaning that there were lots of different connections, so that if you wanted to walk from A to B, you didn't have to go all around the houses. There was a fairly direct route, because that's the sort of thing that encourages people to walk and cycle and be more active, which is incredibly important for everyone's health. So in essence, complete and compact and connected neighbourhoods are 20-minute neighbourhoods or 15-minute cities. The name is sort of not important, it's about what it's all about. So there's lots of different places call them different things, but I think complete, compact and connected sort of sums it up. The Healthy New Towns project also demonstrated how important it is to have really strong communities, because the people around us support our health. That was something that when we were talking about this a couple of years ago, people looked really puzzled, and I think people get it now, that your friends and neighbours and the people around you are so important to health and well-being. And we've all really discovered that in the last year, when we've not been able to see as much of our friends and neighbours as we might normally have done. So creating places where you bump into people, where people are empowered to shape the place they live in, is really important. And it was great to hear Phillippa talking about the work she's doing to make that happen. So what changed in lockdown? We've been talking about places and health for a long time, and sometimes people look really puzzled, and I don't think they do look puzzled now. Everyone realises that the place where you live has a huge impact on your health and well-being, so it's really gone up the agenda, which is good. I think also in this country, people have begun to realise that many people are living in pretty awful conditions in run-down homes and neighbourhoods, and that those places really affect people's well-being. We have a lot of poor health, poor environments, inequality and poverty in the same sort of places. And there are really stark health inequalities, often within quite small parts of one place. So within a few streets, you can have one group of people who've probably got a really long, healthy life expectancy, and people around the corner whose life expectancy on average is much shorter and who live with far more poor health conditions. Those two photographs are both a mile away from where I live in South London, and the experience of living through lockdown in those flats would have been very different depending on which of those flats you're in. So it's really gone up the agenda. So the TCPA, supported by Sport England, who are funding some of our healthy placemaking work at the moment, is really interested in the idea of 20-minute neighbourhoods, or complete, compact places, or 15-minute cities, whatever you'd like to call it. And we wanted to look at places that had been working on this for some time and see what we could learn from them, and see what lessons we could bring back to England for places that were interested in creating 20-minute neighbourhoods. We looked at Paris. I won't talk about Paris because Professor Moreno has already done that wonderfully. We also looked at Melbourne, and we looked at Portland in Oregon. In Melbourne in Australia, they've been working on 20-minute neighbourhoods for some time. They decided on 20 minutes because they asked lots of people how far they were prepared to walk. And for the average person, the average walk was 10 minutes there and 10 minutes back was what they felt prepared to do. So that's why they chose 20 minutes. And in Melbourne, it was very much a partnership between planning and public health. The Heart Foundation in Australia was very much part of this because of the health benefits of encouraging people to be a little bit more physically active. So really strong public health input and a very holistic approach to what would create a neighbourhood where people had most of what they needed nearby. And in Portland, there were a lot of similarities with what had happened in Melbourne, some different lessons as well. They'd done a lot of mapping to find out which places were complete and which places were missing things. And that heat map shows that I think the yellow places are areas where people will have most of what they need nearby, and the darker purpley blue places are places where a lot of facilities are missing, and that's helping them prioritise investment in terms of new facilities or connections so that people can get what they need more easily. So that sort of data collection is really, really important because places are incredibly complicated, and it's now possible to get much more data about how they actually work. And that quantitative data has to be matched with a lot of really good qualitative data, talking to people about what they like and what they don't like, what works, doesn't work. So collecting data is really important to understand how a place functions or doesn't. So having done lots of research and spoken to lots of people, we have put together our own idea of the sort of features that might be included in a 20-minute neighbourhood. Having said that, every place is unique. It has its own physical context, its own buildings, its own culture, its own population. Different places will have a different emphasis and a different way of doing this, and they might not call it a 20-minute neighbourhood at all. But these are the things that we thought from our research emerged as being really important. So I'm just going to mention a couple of them. One of them is about the economy, about keeping jobs and money local. Some councils in England are starting to do this really actively, making sure that the money that the council spends is spent on local businesses, on local food, on local services, and encouraging others to do likewise. And that can really help the economy. So there's a big thing about local economies here, local food production as well. I think increasingly the problems with the multinational food systems that we live with are emerging. There's huge potential to grow more food locally, producing jobs and cheaper, healthier food. And you can see all the other things. They're probably not particularly unexpected, but they're the sort of things that most people need most days to make a good place to live. And that's what it's all about. Is this a good place to live? So through our research, we've come up with some principles for success. Our document's primarily aimed at planners in councils, but could be used by anybody. Having a really good vision of what you're trying to achieve and communicating that well is really important. And Mayor Anne Hidalgo in Paris has done that brilliantly. So that strong leadership is really important. It can come from the grassroots. It can be grassroots upwards. Really important that communities have the power to say what they want to happen. In Paris now, community groups are getting 25% of the local budget to spend as they see fit, which is incredibly empowering. I've mentioned research and data. Absolutely vital to address inequalities, to work with the most marginalised people to make sure that the place that is being changed and created will work for them. That's come through so strongly in all the research. Investment and also willingness to listen to people and adapt. Places are incredibly complicated. Changes might not be right the first time. You might need to adapt them. That's fine. That's part of it. So thinking about how this might work in England, most of our local councils are incredibly short of resources. Some, as you might have read, are pretty much going bankrupt. Really, really difficult. They don't necessarily have enough staff in the roles that would be necessary, or money to spend on things like fantastic graphics and communication and all of that. And working with communities takes a lot of time and effort and resources, and our councils are really struggling to provide that. And then there's a risk that things are rushed in and not communicated well, and we've heard about that earlier. And finally, making sure that there's enough really affordable housing is vital, because otherwise, if you create a place that gets nicer and nicer and more people want to live there, that's going to squeeze out others unless there's really good affordable housing. Now, for councils in England who mostly have to provide housing through what's called planning gain, we don't have a big central budget for social housing in this country, and I think that is a real problem. We can't say, let's not make places better, because it will benefit all of our health and well-being, but we have to think about affordable housing. So I think there's a question about, can we do this in England? Because we've got a lot of problems in terms of the resources at a local level, but also there's a question about, can we afford not to? The benefits for people's health and well-being, for carbon reduction, for a better quality of life could be so huge. So the TCPA is producing a guide for councils in England about how to create 20-minute neighbourhoods. It'll be free to download, and we have a conference on the 24th of March, which again is free to attend. It's on our website, so I hope that lots of you can come along and join us. And more information about our healthy planning work is on our website there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. That's excellent. If you could stop sharing your screen, please. We have run slightly over time. We're going to still have a short discussion, and there were a few questions in the chat, so we might follow up with a blog or something afterwards to address some of these issues, because I think we've probably only going to be able to talk for about 10 minutes now. I see some people are already leaving. There was a question in the chat about somebody suggested that London has a lot of areas with most amenities within a 15-minute walk, and its kind of polycentric nature, it's the idea of London as being a city of villages. The question is, does that make it more suited to a 15-minute city, even perhaps than Paris? But I thought that some of the questions that you were raising there, Julia, at the end, about, so if London is a city of villages, then what about the gaps, and how not all places are equal, not all people are equally served in those places, and we don't necessarily have good political mechanisms for redistributing resources. Do you have any ideas about how we can make this happen in that context?
I think it's really tough. The other issue is that, like all, London was built as a place that was a 15-minute city. It was built as a place where people would walk. Until 100 years ago, walking was the way that most people got around. So most of London, not all of it, but most of it was designed for walking, but has since been really carved up by dual carriageways and motorways, and so there's quite a lot of sort of stitching things back together to be done. In terms of resources, I think a really interesting question is going to be, as I guess more people are going to be working from home, I'm certainly not going to be cramming onto the train I used to cram onto every morning, really stuck in there like a sardine, so I could travel 7 miles to an office. I might travel at a different time of day, but I think people might be spending their money locally rather than centrally. So whether that will help distribute resources a bit and boost local economies, I don't know. But I think also this idea of keeping money local, of not buying everything from multinationals, of buying things from local shops where you can, of councils buying things from local people and local businesses, could help boost local economies.
I think that links to another one of the questions, which was about the sort of donut economics approach, and there's definitely an economic component to it. There was also a question about the viability of public transport in your what you were just saying there, and everybody living locally. how do we afford to continue to run a cross-London underground service? And lots of people in the places that you're working in, Phillippa, for example, are very likely to have to travel into work and are not able to work from home. I don't know also, Kirsty seems to have disappeared actually, but whether, whether there's a corollary of people facing disabilities actually feeling trapped in their local neighbourhoods and not able to travel widely. Is there a, I wonder, Carlos, if you have any reflections on those ideas. You're on mute, Carlos.
Sorry, is it okay now?
Yes, that's good.
Yes, in fact, there are several questions. About the public transportation. In reality, the question is not the capacity for continuing to have incomes if we wish to develop the 15-minute city. The case in Paris is very clear, because in Paris, the mayor of Paris has been implementing a very ambitious urban policy for proposing the free public transportation, in particular for young people and for seniors over 65 years under incomes conditions. In reality, the real question is to define what is our path for developing the urban quality of life. If I wanted to put it in a nutshell, our project, we have 4 pillars. The 4 pillars, this is the ecology, a low carbon city. For that, we, of course, we prefer to develop the wild capability city and to prefer the bikeable city. We prefer to propose the mass transportation by the underground or by the buses. We need, of course, to continue to keep the quality of the public transportation, but our target is the second point, to develop the proximity in order to satisfy the essential urban needs and to avoid gentrification. I agree with Julia, this point. To avoid the gentrification is the most important point if we want to develop a city for all in the vicinity, for the common good, for the square meters, for the housing, for the one-point shops without a speculative market is very important. The first point, this is to reconquer public spaces, with the tactical urbanism, with the placemaking, with the possibility to develop a peaceful street without car. And the fourth point is to develop the citizen empowerment. For that, the city of Paris has decided to dedicate 10% of the budget of the city of Paris. 800 million euros has totally dedicated for the local projects in districts. And the convergence of ecology, proximity, social link, and citizen empowerment is the key for proposing a new model for mixing the social condition, the social category, the social and the economical activities. And the question of with the underground in all cases, we consider that this is the public service, and we need to continue to propose this service. This is one of the common good for all.
Thank you. I think Phillippa, yes, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's like, I think it's so challenging, like especially in outer London. Like I'm working predominantly in a borough where most people, well, many people are in the service economy, so they're definitely not working from home. They're needing vans, they're tradespeople, they have a lot of equipment to go around, they're shift workers, they're having to kind of go to shift in the middle of the night and they don't feel safe on public transport, particularly people from different minority groups. And I think it's very far from this vision that kind of sounds like it's almost already there in places like Hackney, where you've got like, you know, wonderful green space and amenities and local shops and local places to go out and civic services, all in a very sort of close-knit, dense area. But in outer London and also in places that are sort of 100 years old, which the Becontree estate is, it's planned around the car. And it's kind of extremely challenging. And I think there's a huge like equity like mess around kind of working this stuff out. And everyone has a very different idea about what the future is, and can quickly feel like their voice doesn't matter yet again, because they already feel it doesn't matter from generations of being told that, you know, they just work and, you know, they don't have a say in how to shape the future of a place. So it's really challenging in a place that is almost defined by the very mode of transport that we're sort of trying to move away from, when it's many people's lifeblood. And as Kirsty is talking about, you know, many people don't have many options. It's very difficult to kind of make a vision.
I mean, I think surely the first step is at least acknowledging the reality of that, because I think that's that was really what a question I was going to ask was, you know, first of all, is a conceptual idea like the 15-minute city useful in driving consensus and change? But then what does that mean in reality in all the, you know, in all its diverse applications and places? But I was quite taken with Julia's example from Melbourne, I think, with where you're actually seeing data about gaps and need, and therefore there's at least a case that can be made for how resources can be applied. The problem with that, of course, is it's spatial. A lot of that doesn't deal necessarily with demographic need and so on, and a lot of what Kirsty was describing can't necessarily be represented on a plan. I just wonder, is there very quickly, I think we've kind of run out of time now, but Kirsty, I wondered if you wanted to come in on the end there, and whether there's some cause for optimism in at least you know, unpacking these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Roland. I think what's really important is that we both give opportunities for citizens to speak, but more importantly, actually give opportunities for them to be able to contextualise their lived experience in a broader context. One of the biggest issues I've seen in the transport sector is that the voice of disabled people has primarily been heard in forums and groups where people are there by virtue of their impairment and aren't necessarily given the professional opportunity to understand transport modal intersections, you know, the conflicts between different people's needs and the funding background. So I think for me, there's a real opportunity now, if we're all honest and open, and the kind of work that Phillippa, Carlos and Julia are doing is a real opportunity to professionalise those voices, rather than build your designs, have your ideas, and then show it to disabled people at the last moment and not pay them for their professional input. So I think there's a real opportunity for genuine change. and if we don't, what I would say to you all is, and to everyone, is, who are you willing to leave out?
I think that's a really good way of putting it, and I think probably a good note to end on. I'd like to thank you all. I think it was a really fantastic discussion. It's great to sort of, you know, drill into the detail and the alternative views of the same subject. So I'd just like to thank you all very much for your time. Very enjoyable, and hope to see you all again soon.